All right. Today I'm here with Barry Jones, and Barry is the principal and owner of SafeNet Insurance Group, located outside of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And Barry specializes in workers' compensation for mostly for businesses that have an adverse experience modification, a modification over 1.0. And so I'll turn it over to Barry here and we'll get into his process and break down, how he works with companies on controlling their workers' compensation. And we'll dive into each of the steps on that. And so first of all, I turn it over to Barry. And Barry, I'd ask you to say, okay, how do you get into the insurance business and why workers' compensation?
Yeah, I got into insurance back in 2008. I was actually working on golf courses at the time. I was a golf course superintendent, and long hours got to me, and having small kids. And funny, it was kind of looking around the golf course. It seemed like everybody on the golf course was in the insurance business. So I said, "How
Yeah,
hard can it be, huh?" So I started making some calls and got a job interview at the Farm Bureau Insurance and went to work there in 2008. And boy, did I learn real quick. It was a lot harder than those guys on the golf course made it out to be.
yeah.
Yeah. And as
Or
far
maybe
as
they had
workers,
those guys, someone else was paying their greens fees. I don't know.
something, I don't know. There seems like they were everywhere out there. But yeah, I've been doing insurance since 2008. So we're in 16 years in and started off in personal lines, but kind of gradually moved over to commercial and then over into workers' comp. And I don't know, I just found workers' comp intriguing to me. How many clients that I came across that were just given a quote by their agent and said, "Hey, your experience mod's high. It just is what it is. You've had some claims," and no one was doing anything about it. It was interesting to me that workers' comp was one of the only lines of business out of general liability or your business auto or umbrella that you can control. You have total control over your
Yeah,
workers' comp premiums. So I just kind of dove in on it, kind of nerded out on it, and kind of went from there.
good. Yeah, it's one
Yeah,
thing I think. Yeah, I think you made a great point there, Barry. The clients or the insurers, they have to realize that they do ultimately control the cost, but they need guidance from someone like you on the ins and outs. So let's dive into your process and how that works. And you start with you do an experience modification audit. So let's talk about walk through how that works, why it's important for a business, and what can a new client expect from you going through this process with them.
yeah, sure. The first thing I always start with is if I see that your experience mod's high, and high to me being over anything over 1.00, the first thing I'm going to do is perform an experience mod audit. And it's funny to me when I sometimes when I talk to a client and I mention experience mod audit, they look at me like I got a third eyeball because these a
Yeah,
lot of these agents out here they're just not diving into these workers comp experience mods. So it's also funny to me that whenever kind of ask them about experience mod audit, they'll look at me and say, "Oh yeah, the guy comes out every year and he does an audit on it." So I have to even go deeper and
so
explain
it's
to
the
them
the work comp premium audit
the
versus
core
the
cut
work comp
premium audit, yeah, from
experience.
the auditors. So what we kind of do is we audit their experience mod, and what a lot of people don't realize is that over half the mods out there are incorrect.
Yeah.
They're just not accurate. I think I saw a statistic one time over 60% of them are incorrect. So what we do is we just kind of do an audit of that experience mod, and I'm looking for several things here. I take your loss runs and I run it through our experience mod audit and download your worksheet if for either through NCCI or in North Carolina, it's North Carolina Rate Bureau. And I want to look for anything like a low indemnity claim. It's kind of what I'm looking for because those can have a huge impact on your experience mod. And I also kind of match up what the worksheet's showing and what the loss runs are showing. And then I kind of meet back up with the client and I kind of present, here's what I found. We've had these employees with these type of injuries. And then I start probing and asking questions
Okay.
about those injuries and what happened and what steps are we taking to make sure this doesn't happen again, if any.
Now, you mentioned indemnity claims. When you're looking at the worksheets and the loss runs, what type of errors are you seeing? And I guess let's talk about indemnity versus medical claims.
Mhm.
So people understand the difference there and why indemnity claims have much more of an impact.
Yeah, sure. So usually when you have a workers' comp claim, you got two types of payments. Usually you got indemnity, which basically means the client is sitting at home. They're getting paid to not work, basically. They're getting paid usually around 65 to 66% of their normal salary while they're out. Medical is basically medical. You ended up at the doctor or hospital, and you got to get stitched up, rolled ankle, cut finger, whatever it be. The medical is going to pay the medical bills. The indemnity is going to pay you while you're out of work. Is kind of how that works. The thing that I run across all the time with potential clients and clients is they don't realize the effects of indemnity claims that they have on your experience mod. For example, most states are what they call ERA states, which is experience rating adjustment states, which means that if you have a medical only claim, when you get your experience mod rating, you're going to get a 70% reduction in your experience mod calculation with that by that claim just being medical only. So that's why it's really important to make sure we're having medical only claims and we're getting people back to
In
work.
other words, it seems like it's rewarding employers for nipping those claims in the bud before they go out of control and the injured workers just sitting at home and collecting a paycheck.
Yeah, what was happening was a lot of employers were not sending their employees to get the proper care they needed. So if they were getting, a sliced hand or something going on, an injury at work, they were paying for these claims out of pocket and possibly not even getting them the proper care they needed because they didn't want to have a negative experience on the workers' comp experience mod. So NCCI and a lot of these other ERA states came in and says, we're going to give you a 70% reduction on your experience mod if it's medical only. Because they want you to make sure employees are sending their employees to get the proper care they need.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense to reward them
Yeah.
for getting the proper care. So,
Yeah.
are there any other types of common mistakes that you run across as far as claims that you see on loss runs that aren't matching up? Are maybe incorrect reserve amounts, or what other
Yeah.
errors are
Yeah.
you seeing or mistakes do you run across there?
One of our target markets is contractors. And for example, landscapers, for example, I run across this almost 8 times out of 10 for landscapers is whenever I look at their worksheet, they got a certain code. It says, I got $500,000, for example, in a landscaping payroll. And then when I start engaging with a client, I start talking to them and say, so you have, $500,000 in payroll allotted to landscaping. So tell me about the landscaping. I said, well, these guys, they go out and mow, they go out and install mulch and trim hedges and things like that. I said, so
Mhm.
you have a mowing crew and you also have a landscape crew. They said, yeah. Well, what they don't realize is there's two separate class codes for a mowing crew versus the landscaping crew. So what I'm seeing is when they're doing their audit, all that payroll is getting allotted to landscaping. What if they show the auditor, hey, we had 250,000 of that into the let's say mowing and fertilizing and spraying. That's almost $1 per hundred rate reduction, and people just don't realize it. And auditors this day and time, they're getting paid based off the amount of audits they do. They don't get paid hourly.
So it's a
So
case of the experience mod audit finds and corrects a mistake from the workers' comp premium audit
Yeah,
process.
what I'm looking for when I go in is I start asking questions. And whenever I look at that audit, it's showing, let's say, $500,000 in landscaping, but 250,000 of that should have been allotted to
Yeah.
a mowing class code.
So it
So
would
the
lower their
mistake
overall premium
it's
going
affecting
in.
their premium.
Going
So
in.
$250,000 of that premium there, or excuse me, 250,000 of that payroll should have been in a different class code. But that's
Yeah.
just me probing and asking questions. And
Hmm.
I've always it was taught, and I know this for a fact, especially after COVID. Well, auditors, they don't care. They're not there to educate you. They're looking at your numbers, is what they're doing, and they're just putting in data. They're
Well,
not there
aren't
to
a lot of
educate you, show
the
you the
company,
difference.
don't a lot of the companies sub that out, hire independent auditors to go out and they're paid by audit. So it,
Mhm.
if you're a subcontractor doing audits paid by audit, you want to do them as quickly as possible, right?
Exactly. We get paid. They don't get paid hourly, or they don't get paid salary usually. They get paid by the amount of audits to do because they're a subcontractor. So the more audits we can get done, the more money they make.
Yeah,
So they're not there to educate the client on different
yeah,
class codes. They're there to get in and get out, is what
right.
there to do. So
So
that's
it's
one of the most common mistakes I see.
okay. So
Yep.
let's dive in. So you took a look, a deep dive into the experience mod uh, audit and their calculations. So now let's talk about some of the short-term, long-term strategies that employers can use to control their work comp costs. And you talked about, uh, once you identify indemnity issues, how you develop short-term, long-term strategies for that company to improve their experience modification. What are some of the things that they can do to really, I guess, it would be two things, Barry. It would be either uh, reduce the amount of the claim or eliminate the claim from happening in the first place. Would be the two things they could do, right?
Yeah. And two, when I first, go back to them and I kind of show the prospect or client kind of what I found in the audit, I start asking questions. One of the first questions that I always ask is, tell me about your employee handbook. How often
Right.
is your employee handbook updated? And almost 99% of the time, it's we're lucky to see if it's updated once a year. And in that employee handbook, I'm looking for claims reporting. Who are we report? Who is an injured employee responsible reporting claims to, and how fast are they supposed to be reporting these claims? We don't want someone to get
Mhm.
injured on a Monday and wait around till Friday to report it to a supervisor. It should be laid out in that handbook. It's got to be reported by sundown the same day. Uh,
Right.
so that's the first thing I always look for. Next thing I look for is your OSHA 300 logs. Are we filing OSHA 300 logs based on the amount of employees that we have? If you've got 10 or more employees, you've got to post your OSHA 300 logs. So that's another thing I want to look at is your OSHA 300 logs. I'm also, like I said earlier, looking for low indemnity claims. I met with a client here 2 weeks ago, and he was having $500 to $600 indemnity claims. And once I did our experience mod audit and showed him how much those little small $500 and $600 claims were costing him, they were costing him over $4,000 to $5,000 for the insurance company to pay the $500 indemnity claim over three
Yeah.
years. He had no idea. No one was educating him on this. Agents are just not telling their clients about the effects that low indemnity claims are having on their experience mod. Another thing that I'm looking for is tell me about your onboarding procedures. I know the workforce right now is really, really, really tough out there. Finding good quality employees is really hard right now. So we got to be careful that we're not lowering our standards and what we're looking for in an employee. We can't let certain things slide, especially drug testing. Are you drug testing? Are you having them do some type of a physical before you offer them some type of employment? That's something we need to make sure that we're staying on top of because,
You
like
don't want to buy a pre-existing claim.
you don't want to buy a problem is what you want, what you don't want to do. But like I said, once the market gets hard, especially with a lot of people in the contractor industry, they're looking for somebody warm bodies sometimes.
Yeah.
you know? So that's
Well,
something
I
you
would
need to be
imagine
careful of.
also, I saw a stat that I don't know, I think it 60-70% of the workers' comp claims happen from employees who are on the job a year or less. So I
Hmm.
think it would be, it's also important not only the onboarding, but ongoing training and reemphasizing safety training with those people. Talk a little bit about the safety training part of this whole process.
Yeah, whenever we pull loss runs, one thing I'm looking for also is trends. Are we having a lot of low back injuries, soft tissue injuries? Are we having a lot of hand cuts or things like that? Or are we having eye injuries from landscapers with weed eaters? I had a veterinarian here a while back they had 7 claims in 2 years for cat bites on arms, which can be easily taken care of by
Wear some gloves.
gloves up to your elbows, but a lot of
Yeah.
employees wasn't doing it. So as far as training, what I do is I look for, are we having some type of a trend in a certain area with claims, and then we can kind of tailor adjust training around those type of claims. Maybe we need to do some training on lifting if that's we're having soft tissue claims, or we need to have some training on um, workers' comp can be even driving. Can be if you're in a company
Yeah.
vehicle and you get in an accident, that's a workers' comp claim. So we do a lot of training when it comes to um, driving, texting and driving, safe,
Yeah.
hard braking, things like that. And I personally, our agency does not do any type of training. We partner with a company that has a learning management system that offers it to our clients,
Yeah.
so they can offer training to their employees, and we can also log that training. That way, down the road, if there's an issue, we can see the training that they've had.
So it
So,
sounds like making the training relevant to what's really happening in the business. What you
yep,
see happening as far as trends or instances or occurrences that are happening within that business. So, then
yep.
just, you know, checking off the boxes to say, well, we're going to do training on lifting this month, but there aren't any back injury claims. So,
Yeah, every business is different, and like I said, I look for trends and claims. So one company that's a heat and air company may have a trend of a certain type of claim versus the same type company. They may have a trend in another type of injury.
yeah.
So we want to make sure we tailor made the training to the types of claims they're having. Now you're going to have one offs here and there of things happen, but I look for trends and tailor made our training to those trends.
Now, let's talk. We touched upon this, but I think it's important the how employees report claims and what are you seeing as far as what are some of the common things that you recommend to employers as far as claim reporting processes? What's important as far as that? I know you mentioned as far as they need to be reported within that same workday, not linger over the weekend. Or is there anything else that's important as far as that initial claim reporting?
Yeah, the biggest thing is whenever you hire a new employee, they have got to know who they're reporting an injury to. You'd be
Okay.
surprised the amount of employees out there that if they get injured, they really don't even know who we should be reporting a claim to. I strongly agree that every employer should have some type of a safety manager, or if they're big enough, even have a committee. Um, so they need to make sure their employees fully understand if there's an injury, who are we reporting that claim to? And it needs to be reported the same day. We can't sit around, even if you don't think it's irrelevant, or this be something that should be healed up, a small cut or something like that. You need to be reporting these things to your supervisor, and the employer needs to let those employees know the certain process that needs to go through and who we're reporting those to. So that's the biggest thing with us is making sure those employees know who we're reporting claims to.
Okay. Now, switching gears a little bit, you were mentioning about the impact that indemnity claims have on the experience modification calculation. And one way to combat that is to have a return to work policy. Let's talk a little bit about how return to work works, how a company would put that together and what that entails.
Yeah, that's the return to work is something that I beat all the time. I know sometimes when I first start engaging with a potential client, that they were like, geez, that's all you seem to talk about is return to work. So, but the first pushback you're always going to get is that's why I pay insurance premiums. Why would I pay an employee not to do their normal job just to have them here so the insurance company doesn't have to pay them? And I get that. That's the lens they're looking through.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but what we do is we kind of show them, all right, if Johnny employee gets injured and he has a $500, well, let's say he's an irrigation tech for a landscaping company, for example, and he slices his hand open. and the doctor comes out and says he's not allowed to get this hand wet. He don't need to be using this hand for at least, let's say, for example, 7 to 10 days. So a lot of employers will send that employee home and say, come back when you can come back and do your normal job. The negative effect there is then they can start claiming, after 7 days, they can start claiming indemnity payments. And if they start claiming indemnity claimants, like I was talking about earlier, you've lost your experience mod rating adjustment from the state and you lost your discounts. So having some type of a return to work program for that injured employee, let's talk about the landscaper that slights his hand. He might not can go back on the job and do his normal duties, but what he might can do is other things that can help the business and stay working. For example, he
Maybe
might
you could deliver
deliver
supplies or
parts. He
yeah.
can deliver parts. He can help train some of the new guys. He might can help the office staff with phones. There's all types of things that a employee can do. And this thing gets deeper too, because once you have an employee that's out, the longer he or she is out, the less likely that employee is going to come back to work. They start sleeping in more, start surrounding themselves by people with bad habits. Not always, but we see that sometimes,
They see the attorney ads on TV.
See the attorney ads on TV, daytime TV. So statistically, the longer they're out, the less likely they are to come back to work. And it's funny to me when you get someone who's used to being out in the field as a tech, and all of a sudden they're inside answering phones and doing some clerical work. It's funny how fast they heal up too. So and they can get back to work.
Yeah.
So
I think there's a side benefit to that. They maybe understand the overall
sure.
business operation a little bit better too.
I do. I 100% agree with that. When you've been out in the field, you don't understand what the CSR inside the office answering the calls goes through. You might could even provide some insight. Hey, we need to be asking these questions. This would help
Yeah.
us out in the field more. There's so many benefits to having
Seems like it's a
uh,
big win all around for the
all the way
employer.
around. If you can get that employee back to work, it can offer some insight on some other things that they're doing and improve the overall company there and their processes and procedures as well.
Well, it's a win not only for the employer but also the employee because you keep them productive and
Yep.
keep their spirits up because yeah, a lot of times if someone's injured on the job, they may have some fears and reservations about what their job, do they really have a job, what's going on. So
Yeah, and two, another thing for employers is a lot of times when an employee gets injured, they'll send them home, and they never even you'd be surprised they never even, there's no one even in place to follow up and check on that
yeah,
injured employee. It's amazing to me because if you get injured and you're an employee and you stay at home 7 days, 10 days, 14 starts into 2 weeks, you've not heard from anybody. Doubt starts creeping in.
yeah, you're
Uh,
thinking no one cares that I'm even hurt or injured or whatever. And,
yeah, they don't
yeah.
care about me. And that daytime television for those attorneys are starting to get more and more enticing there. So,
Well, a lot of this, it sounds like a lot of this boils down to really effective and proactive communication. You know,
yes,
is really what
yes.
makes a difference here.
Make sure that they are being communicated to. Make sure we know what happens next. Make sure they got rides to their follow up doctor's visits. Whatever it takes, make sure we're staying in contact and you show that you care about their well being.
Yeah,
Yep.
sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, we touch upon a lot of different things here, Barry. I guess in wrapping this all up, can you share some success stories where your processes significantly helped the client, whether it was in a an experience mod audit where you discovered some errors, maybe it was reducing a claim. Maybe there are probably some different scenarios here of your work with employers on what were the results of your work with them.
Yeah, we had a client here about 6 months ago, well, potential client at the time. And whenever I was looking at their loss runs, they had an open claim on an injury that a guy had dislocated his elbow. And they
Mm-hmm.
had the adjuster had $100,000 reserve set on that elbow because they were projecting for him to have sort of have some type of surgery there.
Mm-hmm.
But they wasn't real sure if physical therapy was going to help this employee or just they're going to have surgery. So looking at that claim, and I'm showing it's showing $100,000 reserves. What people don't realize is 18 months after your policy renews, your experience mod is going to be set for the following year. So what
Mhm.
happens is they're going to look at open claim reserves. Your experience mod is going to be based off of any reserves that are set out there. And the agent that was working with them did not inform them of this. So we went in and started working with them, and I actually started talking to the adjuster, and they decided that after speaking to the doctors that they could get by with just not surgery, but just having physical therapy, and was able to lower that claim down from $100,000 down to 25,000 with 2 weeks to spare before their new experience mod was released, saving them thousands of dollars in workers' comp premiums. So, but that's a lot of people just don't realize that it's imperative that we are as agents are taking a look at those open reserves and doing everything we can to get those things reduced. I always say here in the office, squeaky wheels get grease, and
Yeah.
that's one of the situations we got to stay on top of. It's full court press there.
Again, it's that proactive communication where the the employer, they're busy running their business. You know, if they're a
Yep.
landscaper, they're out doing jobs, making sure jobs are going. They don't really even know how to communicate that
No,
with an insurance carrier and to dig
no.
in and get that done. And that's the value that you add as the advisor to walk them through that process.
Yeah, it's so easy for insurance advisors right now to have reactive approaches. You call us, you need a certificate, we send it out. It comes where we haven't heard from you, renewal time, we send your renewal time. We send your renewal out to you. It's amazing to me what a proactive approach. We see when we first engage with a client, we set up a 12-month timeline of service and what you
Yeah.
can expect from us every single month. And it's set up in our CRM to reach out to that client every single month and what we need to go over with them. And that's for us, it's a proactive approach versus a reactive approach a lot of agents take, and it has significantly helped our clients with things like lowering their workers' comp premiums.
Well, I think the other point is, I think for businesses to look at this, if they get control of their workers' compensation, it can be a competitive advantage for them. If they have a positive experience modification, maybe they have the capability not only to have a debit on their rates, but a credit to their rates. So they could have a 40-50% advantage over their competition. Really important if there are contractors bidding jobs. If your workers' comp is 40-50% lower than your competition.
Yeah. Also, too, they're not supposed. People that are bidding jobs. I have seen it happen out here in the field. They're not. It's not supposed to go this way. It even says on the bottom of the NCCI worksheet that whenever they're bidding their jobs, their experience mod is not supposed to have any
Right.
impact on their ability to do the work. But I have seen time and time again that general contractors do not hire subs with anybody with the experience mod rate of a 1.0.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
can preclude them from even bidding on the job.
I
So
have heard, I have personally not experienced this, but I've heard it out in the field of people going out of business, and subcontractors going out of business because their experience mod went too high and they couldn't get jobs with general contractors because contractors wouldn't hire them. So,
yeah,
yeah, they're not supposed to do that, but we do see it out in the field some.
we know that's reality. So
Yes.
it's a way to
Yeah.
weed out if you're a GC to weed out who the potential that you want to work with. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're a GC and this contractor's got experience mod of a 0.80 and this one's got one of a 1.80, well, that tells you a little bit about them, maybe.
well, yeah, I think it's an indicator of the type of business they operate also.
Yep.
Because a
Yeah,
lot of this,
especially. Well, I was going to say, especially if it's a one-off, you get one year where it went way up or something like that, and it starts trending back down. But if you see every year, time and time again, they're over one, that can tell you a little bit about the operation they're running.
yeah,
Unfortunately.
yeah.
Yep.
So, well, let's wrap this up, Barry. I guess this to wrap this, I would ask you, what advice would you give to businesses that are looking to take control of uh, uh, their workers' compensation costs and their experience modification?
Yeah, the biggest thing is make sure you're working with an agent who had, like I said earlier, has a proactive approach and not a reactive approach. You want to make sure that you have your return to work program in place. You want to make sure your agent is coming out and visiting on site. You want to make sure
Hmm.
your agent is doing an experience mod audit and making recommendations and looking for claim trends. You, like I said, you want to make sure you're working with an agent or slash advisor that has proactive approaches versus reactive approaches. And because that's their job, they get paid
Yeah,
quite a bit of money.
yeah,
Agents get
definitely.
paid quite a bit of money based off the percentage of your premium. And you got to earn as an agent, you got to earn your pay. So you can't be bending elbows at the bar or getting a quick nine in on a Friday afternoon. We got to be out here and be proactive. And that's we have engaged with so many clients off of a proactive approach, showing our timeline of services versus and it's got a lot of people, a lot of agents will call. They want to quote. They want to quote. They want to quote. We don't do a lot of quoting in here. We earn our business based off of the processes and procedures we put in to make sure those workers' comp claims, or excuse me, worker comp premiums stay low based off of that experience model.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
well, let's wrap up here. What's the best way to get a hold of you, Barry?
sure. It's you can email me at barry@safenetinsgroup.com. You can reach me directly 336-280-4606 and go to our website and safenetinsgroup.com. And even if I'm not you're not a client of ours, I'll be more than happy to sit down, go over an issue you may be having, and discuss it and put you in a better position.
Sounds good. Thank you, Barry.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
All right. Well, thank you a ton.
Okay. So let me stop the recording here.